our first item on the agenda is our consent agenda, which consists of our minutes from August 27, 2018. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
If so, can we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions, comments?
I'll just comment that I was absent.
Okay. So one thing that I want to clarify, in the section related to the discussion on the 6th grade teacher, there's a mention that we are looking for a long-term substitute. I thought at the end of our conversation, we came to the conclusion that that was, because of the way it was posted, it wasn't the case, but it was still intended for 1 year, but not necessarily in a long-term substitute case. Okay. So I don't know how you want to amend that, Cheryl. I don't. Is there a specific?
I think we'll take the language right off the posting.
Okay. All right. So let's do that so that the record reflects. Anything else? Any other comments? Edits? Okay. All in favor to approve the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Visitors' comments? No?
Good.
All right. Once you realized that I was about to turn the camera.
That's right, not what I had to say.
Otherwise, you were well prepared. Came with a folder. All right. New business. We're gonna have to table it. I hear. Okay.
Yes.
Which was our professional teacher status. Unfortunately, our teachers couldn't be here tonight, so we will do it next time we get together. Rest of the agenda will be our old business, starting with food service contract.
Yep, so I'm just waiting for the state to send us that letter that pretty much gives it their blessing, and then we can forward it to Chartwell's to sign. But Chartwell's is operating under, good faith right now, even though we don't have a signed contract. So I've been in contact with the person at the state a couple times, and they were out of the office. So I'm hoping this week that we'll have that letter, and then we can move forward with getting it signed and having it fully executed.
So the current contract that we agreed on, is it the one that we edited and sent back?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
they were good with whatever
Yes.
we
Yep.
sent to them.
Yep.
Okay, we're waiting for the.
We're just
state
waiting for them to
approve
give
that.
their official approval letter.
Okay. Any questions on food service contract?
Is that the one that's in the folder?
Yes. I mean, it didn't change since last time because we're waiting for approval from the state on that one that you had
Yes.
posted in the folder. Okay. The 18-19 contract with Immaculate Heart of Mary.
Yeah, so that one and the GAA contract, they're both with you to sign.
Okay.
Kathy and I just worked on getting them both into the same format on the same letterhead because they were different last time.
Yep.
We did have to revise some dates on there for Immaculate Heart, but they're ready for you to sign. They're good to go.
You say you did have to, but
We did. All the
dates
changes
are
are in
good.
there.
Okay.
Everything is up to date, and it's good for your signature.
Okay. So I will sign these after.
Okay.
At the end of our meeting.
Yep. So that's both Immaculate Heart and GAA.
Okay. All right. But as usual, I'll just quickly
Yeah, yep,
go through
yep,
and then
yep,
sign it. There are 2 copies for one of them. Do you know why?
GAA has 2 copies for some
2
reason.
copies?
Yeah, I send them 2.
Okay.
And I think what it is they keep one, and instead of me sending it back to them after, so
Okay.
it's always been that way.
All right. That's good. So the contracts were done. This is going very fast, guys. It's making us dizzy now. Class size.
Let's not go cray-cray.
Yes. Class size enrollment.
Yes, so I have put in your folder, and I do apologize, it was updated. I had to meet with Linda Tees at the high school today to get the school choice numbers. So if this format is helpful, we can add to this as we see enrollment change. But in general, for the first time since at least 2014, probably 2010, we're seeing an increase in enrollment. So we're thrilled about that.
Awesome.
So we have right now currently enrolled with us district-wide, we have 734 students.
Can you remind us where we were at the end of last year?
Yes, at the end of last year, we had 712 students. Yep. And I just want to remind people, I think it's a good exercise to go out to the DESE website and look at their figures. There's great information under the radar, which I can share with everyone here as well. But when they take a look at their enrollment, it's October 1st. So the numbers are always a little off, and it's not that we're not doing what we should be doing. These are our local numbers, and then October 1st is the big snapshot that the state takes, and they build all of their real information off of that date. So ours are always in flux, kids leaving, kids coming, school choice in and out. So our numbers are a little bit more fluctuating than what you see on the state report, but it doesn't mean that they're inaccurate. I want people, particularly on the town, the finance board and the select board, to understand that, because sometimes they don't understand that that number can change. That number does change.
Yeah, I think that number was 701 or something
Yes,
like that
yes,
in
yep.
October last year.
Yes, it was 701. So between that October and the end of our school year, we ended up with a net positive of 12, but that doesn't mean that some students left and we actually enrolled more. It's just at the end of the year we had 712.
So where were we last year at this point? Because I know we had a few people move in throughout the year too. But last year, I guess, with the budget, when we look at the budget like last
So
year,
when we projected enrollment last year for the budget, we projected 703 students. So at 734, we're well above that, and that's a combination of a significant resident enrollment, which we just couldn't anticipate, probably resulting from the new school, but also building in town, homes in town becoming available, and I think in general an excitement about the town, which is great news, and then also an increase in school choice. So you'll see particularly in kindergarten, which is where we like school choice, because at that young age we can really have students acclimate to the culture and climate of Granby and really become successful students and really enculturated right into our fabric as very young students.
Right. And I think both factors that you mentioned are valid, that some folks probably see the new school, but we should also tell everyone that on the high school side we have positive numbers as well.
Yes,
it's not
we do.
just the elementary school,
Yes.
it's the high school as well, so it's not only because there's a new building that folks are coming in.
Correct.
And the other side of your account, I think, is correct as well, that there are a lot of new folks coming in town, which is a great thing for Granby. And I, as I'm driving here, I'm looking around and I'm seeing new lots, new homes being built and all that. So there is an interest in Granby, which is good to see, good to know, and we may have more students coming into our district because of that. The other thing about school choice is that in past years we had, in fact, I have many examples in my head, folks who had their children here as school choice students, and then they decided to move in town because they realized that this is a town they wanted to be in. So we could see an impact on that side as well. Any questions on class size enrollment? So we combined class size and enrollment. I know you had some class size related thoughts. I don't know if you wanted to share it today or later.
Well, I don't know. I guess it was just going to be a continuation of the discussion from
Right.
last meeting.
So I had done, thank you for the articles, by the way, those
Sure.
were very helpful. I had begun sort of thinking about how to measure, based on our conversation, and came up with, some, I think, categories that we can talk about and think about how we might measure. Whether or not they're directly related to school choice, I think that they're good indicators regardless. The other thing I wanted to do is bring it to the admin team and get their thoughts around, how we can collect some of that data and what would be meaningful for them as well. So some of the categories, for example, were student achievement. So for MCAS, you can do percent proficient, you can do student growth percentiles. For things like culture and climate in the classroom, we can do referrals for tiered interventions for
Right,
behavior. I mean,
right.
what I'd like to collect.
Also, simple things like when a student gets written up and gets sent to the office,
Yes.
just
Yeah,
simple
exactly,
things like
simple
that.
things. Now, probably fortunately for Granby at the elementary school, not a lot of students get that kind of intervention. The teachers are very good at really organizing their classrooms so that their students' behavior is addressed immediately right in the classroom. But there are those students that, that doesn't work for, so they do get a referral perhaps to the office or a conversation with the principal. I think tracking those. And I think, especially because it's 6th grade this year where the teacher has been added, I think talking to the students and really asking them about how they're feeling about their classroom and their engagement, based on not only enrollment but a lot of factors in the school.
So I mean, the thoughts that I had based on all of the articles that you had sent, plus other research that I've done over, that we all have probably done over class sizes. I do think it's worth just summarizing some of the thoughts because not only for our benefit, but for folks at home too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was just kind of a summary on, there must have been probably, I'm going to say 12 articles and studies and so this is just kind of a recap. So I don't know if you wanted to, I sent it to you because I just didn't.
Yeah. No, we can actually, when we, first of all, let me just take a step back. I think we all agree that the conversation last time was really beneficial. In fact, from the perspective of our role as a school committee strategy, where we want to go and what criteria really determine what we want to do for the school district and what we want to see in the school district, it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. But this is an important factor for us going forward because it really determines the math around how many students we're going to have in our classrooms. That determines, especially on the elementary side, the number of teachers, because on the high school side, the subjects determine the number of teachers for the most part.
Student request.
But on the elementary side, it is how many students we have that determines it. Therefore, we have to have some good conversation around how many students we think would be ideal per classroom. I was actually surprised and overwhelmed in a way because I could have included probably 5 times as many references in that email. Some of them are very repetitive, some of them are interesting, some of them are visibly biased, one way or the other. So I included some samples, but tried to really stick to those where there was some message at the very least. I will start with my takeaways, and I boiled it down to 2 things. In fact, let me just say 3. One is that there is really no consensus as to what the ideal class size should be. But what I understand is that at least based on what class size requirements are by certain states, what the research shows, folks are thinking that the number of students less than 20 for earlier classes and number of students in mid-20s or around the 20s for higher classes is something to be considered, especially folks who are in favor of small class sizes. But what occurred to me, especially with that book that I was reading that you gave to me, which I'm gonna buy and keep it as a reference too, and I should have brought it here so that everybody else could see it. I apologize for that. you can make a classroom as small as you want. If the instruction side doesn't change,
Mhm.
in other words, if you have 10 students in a classroom and we just basically tell them what it is and then say this is a lecture and you're going to hear what we are telling you and then you're going to take tests, standardized tests or quizzes or whatever it is, it seems like everybody agrees almost nothing will change.
Yes.
So what I got, my biggest takeaway was not only we have to focus on the classroom size, but how we provide education, how we engage the students, how we make them active participants in their own education, and get them to that cultural level where they don't hesitate raising their hands and asking questions and really showing a passion for learning. That's when the small classroom size becomes really beneficial for the students. So we have really work to do on both sides. So just speaking about classroom size is not to really give us visible benefits, it seems, that
Right.
we can easily measure.
Mhm.
So that's what I got, combining those two sides, the articles and the book.
And just to kind of springboard on that, the studies that not only were you referencing, but also through my own research, they're like 30 years old. So there's no current data that really promotes one way or the other. And even studies that are as recent as maybe 2007, 2008, they reference these older 30-year-old studies. So my question is, are they even comparable anymore? Because so much has changed in the last 30 years. And so that was one thing that stuck out in my mind. And again, to Emery's point, there was no definitive conclusion about performance and class size, even on the largest of these studies. Some of them, 20 seemed to be the right amount, but gains, I'm just going to read some of this. Gains were most significant in people of color and disadvantaged students, and results remained consistent throughout their education. Studies suggest a combination of reasonable, around this 20, class size, and teacher performance as being critical to student success. And higher quality performing teachers can absorb some of the higher class sizes better than lower performing teachers can, without stretching them too thin. Let's see. Oh, and some of my takeaways. Parents, teachers, administrative staff in our district largely agree that smaller class sizes are desirable, but if we don't have buy-in from FinCom and the select board, it's going to remain this economics versus the educators debate, right? So, and neither one of those is wrong or incorrect, and it's just, we're just going to keep going to our same camps because they're looking for data results. Right, so we need to provide some data results on our own hypotheses, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. So we can even figure out what the optimal class size is for our district. The other thing, do teachers need more specialized training if class sizes are reduced? Because, in order for them to take advantage and customize the instruction to, these smaller class sizes and deal with each student's individual needs, and then they can interact with parents more effectively, are teachers prepared to do that if we go into lower class sizes? So they would need more professional development around that. Well, those are my biggest takeaways. Oh, yes, the other thing, teacher performance kept coming up in these studies, right? So to me, it seems like performance evaluations are critical, right? Because then we can have the most effective teaching staff, and I don't know. Those are the things that popped out for me.
Did the same thing. I just kind of wondered how we did that, because from our perspective on this committee, all we do is we pick a target number, but how do we ensure that the teachers are doing the right thing with that number? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we ask often is who's doing the heavy lifting? Are the students doing the heavy lifting, or are the teachers doing the heavy lifting? So are the teachers doing direct instruction 75% of the time, 80%, 90%? Because if they're doing direct instruction at that percent, innovation and the wealth that you could get in a smaller class, it's the same instruction, it's just with fewer students. So your point is well taken, and I think that's our conversation, and I'm thrilled that the strategic plan has all of these pieces embedded in it, whether it's innovative curriculum and learning experiences for students, whether it's empowered teacher leadership to get the district moving in that direction, communicating to the to the community that this is the work we're doing. I think that's going to get students, families, parents, FinCom excited about the work we're doing and behind it in terms of resources.
As long as we have data to support it, because
Yeah.
if we don't, we're just not gonna get FinCom. They are a finance committee, and
Yeah.
that is what they look at, so.
Right,
Um,
and there's improvement we need to make. When we look at the, comparatively, we've looked at, the per pupil expenditures, but comparatively, we need to look at our MCAS performance and our student growth percentiles, and those don't equate to, what we're spending per pupil. And there is growth that we need to make, and there's changes in instruction that we need to make, but how we do that, I think, can either be directive or empowering. And when it's empowering, then it gets down to the students, because then they're empowered to do the fearless learning and asking any question they need to and seeking that extra help and all of those things.
Mhm.
But so my 2 weeks has been how do we capture that nugget?
Right, right.
What ways can we capture that nugget? Whether it's culture and climate from the student's perspective, whether it's teacher satisfaction in the classroom and the ability to, where are the surveys around that? Where's the research base around that? So, going back to the principals and saying, what do we currently have in terms of district assessments we can use for student performance, and then putting the parent piece in place, because we can't ignore that parents have an expectation for the quality of instruction and the types of classrooms that they want their students in.
It seems like the most challenging piece to capture is going to be the non-standardized testing.
Yeah. It's
factors.
the engagement,
Yeah.
it's the motivation,
Right.
it's the change in lessons that have occurred because we're doing this kind of professional development and implementation of the strategic plan goal 1. That's gonna be the tricky part.
And how do you capture a student's engagement if the class size is smaller, right?
Right.
That is just gonna be a challenging.
Right, because we don't have an experiment. We're not
Right.
setting this up so that some students get it and some students don't.
Yeah.
We made an assumption that this is the number that we would like, and then we went forward with it. So that's sort of where I got stuck in thinking about how we're going to collect this data.
Well, I think from their perspective, so I put on the finance hat, they're gonna be looking to try to compare us with other districts.
Yeah.
Their class sizes, trying to be, the devil's advocate, so to
Yes.
say, right?
Yep.
So, well, if you did go up another 5, students per class, as this town does, wouldn't these results be the same? And we need to be able to say, no, because, right?
Right.
This would be impacted and that would be impacted.
Would it be possible, because we have 24 and 24 in grade 5, could we use that
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
as the other piece of as the control group?
I think one of the things that stuck out for me in the research was the fact that there's so many other variables that affect student learning. So, yes, you can, but then I think you have to be careful about asking that question. Is it that there are more special education students? Is it that there are more students that are economically disadvantaged? Is it that they had more intervention as a kindergartner? So there's a whole bunch of things that may impact that student performance.
Well, yeah, but even the studies take all of that into account. It's such a huge undertaking. Even the
Exactly.
studies,
Yeah.
talk about those limitations
Yep.
too. So That's the nature
You do,
of it.
right, so you do the best you can,
Right.
I think.
And you,
Um,
and as long as you're making some educated, I don't wanna use the word guess, but, on some level, you're dealing with guessing. You know, you're just, you're
Yep.
trying to make this as educated as you possibly can.
One thing that comes to mind, well, first of all, you're right that this is second week of school. And, so
Woo.
it's difficult to set up,
First full week.
First
First
full
full
week,
week.
yes.
but it is difficult to set up an experiment that will capture the whole thing. But are there any measurements? Probably don't have strong metrics, but are there any measurements that we can use to compare? One thing that comes to mind is, that's why I asked last time whether sixth grade is when we have MCAS, just to confirm, which is the case, right? So, you know, 1 year is not really a huge thing, but
Right.
if we can say we not only have this size class, but we changed certain things, and those things are these, and
Yep.
then maybe we can, I mean, whatever, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point difference in MCAS, we can see whether or not there is any change,
Mhm.
because that's standardized tests.
Yep.
We don't like them that much, but in this case, it may be helpful because
Evan-
it's
yep.
standardized. Everybody's taking the same thing. All of our students took the same thing last year. So that might be one type of measurement. The other thing is, maybe we can determine what is changing on the instructional side. So
That
what
was
type
my
of
thought, yeah.
what is
Mhm.
what is a smaller class allowing the teachers to do?
Yes.
And then we can do surveys. You can
Right.
survey the families, you can survey the students,
Mhm.
you can survey the
Mhm.
teachers to see what they are seeing as changing, and you know,
Right.
that's
Yes.
surveys we use
Yep.
for that type of measurement purposes too. And there are some little things that, you know, will not change very quickly probably, but in some of those pieces even, you probably saw things, references to homework, you know, how you assign homework, what it means really, is it always necessary? If we are going to make some changes in the classroom that will allow the students to be more engaged, maybe there is a way to measure some of those things. We're not gonna have a huge set
Right.
of metrics, and I would not want to,
Right.
but what are some of the key components that we can decide very quickly?
Yeah.
And then say, you know, these are some of the things that we can do and measure.
Mhm.
Well, the beauty of this too is, it's not like we've looked through this lens previously. You know, we do have the opportunity here to say, okay, this is what we wanna measure. How are we gonna go about this? This has never been done before, so getting your admin team sitting around and thinking through this
Exactly.
lens, I suspect you guys are gonna come up with more than what you think you might.
Right, and I think that's what I meant when I started, which is, this isn't just about class size, really, this is
No.
about school culture, classroom
Right.
culture, student engagement, motivation, innovative curriculum, and learning
That's-
experiences for kids.
That's the most
That's
important.
right, so how do we get that information, and simultaneously, is class size impacting that in some way?
Yeah.
Or parents' feelings, students' feelings, teachers' feelings about being able to get to these types of learning experiences for kids. So, yes, it's exciting, and I'd like the leadership team to help in generating, you know, what is gonna be helpful and impactful for their practice and helping teachers get to that next level.
So, did you say that you have a meeting
Yes, so
scheduled?
we have one tomorrow actually, and
And
they're every other week, so.
so then by the next
Yep.
meeting, we'll have some general idea
Yes.
of
Yep.
how we can go about this?
Yep. And probably a timeline, I would think.
Okay, good.
So, going back to the book,
Yes.
I'm assuming there's an approach along with that book. I mean, she's in a way trying to sell her consulting services as well to whoever may want to get it. But I think that's one of the very nicely written books. She doesn't claim to know anything or everything, but she really found the right sources to pull them together
Yes.
in a very thoughtful way. So I really liked it for that reason. But here's the question: are we doing anything with that? Because almost everything that we just talked about, there is something about those in that book,
Yes.
directly or indirectly. There is something. Is there an opportunity to leverage that
Right.
as we are, doing development days and all that
Right,
stuff?
so right now it's really at the leadership admin level, but my hope is that the discussion through training of the instructional leadership teams, that becomes the driving conversation for the leadership teams, that then drives the conversation around what is our instructional focus for students and for the school, and then you start to really focus on those innovative activities for kids and different instructional strategies beyond direct instruction. Direct instruction has its place. It always will have its place. But scientific inquiry has its place as well. How often are we giving kids a problem and then requiring them to use scientific inquiry to get to a solution? In other words, who's doing the heavy lifting? Are we just telling them this is how it's going to be, or are we using a different instructional model to get them to go deeper? And that's really the conversation with the ILTs this year, and how we develop and design curriculum units of instruction, all of this year to start pushing kids to do more of that. And I think what we're going to look for are changes in students going from proficient to advanced, because that's that next step. Students are advanced when they're starting to dig deeper. More students earning qualifying and higher qualifying scores on AP exams. So, and again, part of the strategic plan is to think about a district-wide assessment system. So what is an assessment system that can measure some of the things we're looking for, as opposed to just concrete skills? Are there assessment systems that are going to allow us to look at reading comprehension, written expression, all of those higher order thinking things that kids have to do? So it's all part of the work this year.
So when you say this year, I'm assuming these are going to be done in steps,
Yep.
right? Because we can't boil the ocean. Will there be a plan after
So
those
we-
meetings
yeah.
that will say, this is our roadmap and we're going
Right.
to be
Yeah.
targeting these
So that's something I know you
milestones?
had given some thought around, and I did want to talk to you about both the strategic plan timeline and sort of Gantt chart, if you will, but then also more specifically around the innovation piece. How do we work that? Yes, so I was
Okay.
hoping to drag you in.
All right, that's good. That's exciting. Jen, all right. Thank you, Deanne, for the summary. We can continue this conversation. I think we can make this, not necessarily the same
Right.
subject, but we can make this part of our meetings. I find it very, very helpful.
Did we decide on a retreat or what? I can't remember.
I don't think we did.
We didn't decide.
I don't think so.
Well, that
We
seems.
have a lot of conversation
Yeah,
about
I
like
know.
school committee goals, and I
Right.
had it written down at one point, but then
Well, I'm looking
I
back
think
and
it-
I don't see a definitive
yeah, that's what I
decision.
had.
Right.
And I don't know, that seems like a pretty big piece of all of this, and.
Yeah, I have it. School committee and superintendent goals. That's all I wrote.
Yeah.
What we're talking
I'll speak about proposed goals for the school committee when we get to the self-evaluation, which I will move it up, which is the last item.
Yep.
And then I think that's gonna drive some of your goals as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just, share what I tried to do with the self-evaluation, and that
That
can
was
drive.
really helpful to see, like the highlights of the. Yeah, it was like,
Cool, that's good.
and I'm glad I only had one bad.
I didn't even look at the,
There's only one.
I looked at it
were good. I was like, okay, y'all can work on your own stuff.
You guys suck.
You know, that's very interesting. I know you're kidding, but that's a very prevalent mindset. After we, talk to folks about continuous improvement and that this is not a competition and there's really no scoring, we always find someone who's asking about the score. So, how did I do? And did I do better than the other person?
Mhm.
So it is. I mean, we're human beings, right? Just we want to have some measurement and we want to be better than where we were before and the other people around us. So that's why those scores don't necessarily by themselves mean that much, but directionally they're
Yes.
good for our conversation. So I will not. Are we good with the class size enrollment? And great to hear, by the way. And turns out I misspoke. We are 2 students less than last year, or what we had budgeted for the high school,
Yes.
right?
So, and last meeting, I had a brief conversation with you, and what we didn't realize is that at the high school, that number was prior to students going to Pathfinder and the 4 students that ended
That
up at
went
Hope
to,
Francis.
Hi-
So
hockey.
we were a little over exuberant when we got our first numbers out of the high school, and then when the students actually showed up, we had forgotten that there are 4 Pathfinder students and then the 4 students that ended up at Pope Francis. So, but still good news, it's not going down at the levels that it had been.
Oh, not at all.
So,
I mean, and overall, it's
Right.
it's
and
pretty
overall,
good.
it's up.
Grade 6 teacher.
Yes, so we were able to put forth a hiring recommendation for a teacher, so we're excited about that. And
So the teacher is not here yet.
I believe they were coming to do paperwork today, and they were a sub, so they already had some of the qualifying paperwork.
So they already split the classroom.
Yes,
we're
they
waiting for
they
it.
did.
Okay.
Yep. So we had a paraprofessional thankfully step in and take over the class for a couple of days, and so this teacher will hit the ground running.
Okay. Any questions on the teacher? We probably don't know anything budget related yet. It's going to be determined
Right.
when
Yep.
the teacher's in. Okay, we can probably talk about it later.
Yep.
At a later meeting.
And if you wanted to stay on track, G and H we'll talk about at the second
Next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just report on financial stuff every second meeting of the month.
All right.
But afterwards, we're gonna set up a subcommittee,
Yes.
because that'll
Yep.
be here before we know it, so.
Yep.
And just while we're there, Adam's been working on the business office manual, and it's a draft, but we'd like to do that at the subcommittee to get a look at it first,
Mhm.
so that we can introduce it. To the
Subcommittee
full
being the
committee.
finance budget.
Yeah.
Finance
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I mean, because most of it's budget related, there's some
I
other,
think that's a great idea.
there's some other processes in there, but
Okay.
for the most part.
I know we're going to look at it, but what you have in mind is also something that we can share with anyone who says, you know,
So-
how are you doing?
So
this?
my end goal, and I say it's a draft because we can always add to it. My end goal would be to by this time next year, have it approved, and some of the process that I want to make more efficient, like the requisition PO process, work orders, technology requests, all that stuff, have a training at the beginning of school before the students are here while they're back for their PD or something like that, and say, here's the business office manual, here's parts of it that pertain to the principals, clerks, admin assistants, and teachers, and kind of just review that with them and make sure that everyone's on the same page and everyone knows the process for the business office on how we do certain things. A lot of the processes are in place. I just think they need some tightening up. So this manual will certainly guide people in the right direction when they have questions. So it's something I've always, in both my previous jobs, that we've always had one. So I used a lot in one of my previous jobs, I was a big part in developing that. So I used a lot of what I used in the past to kind of develop this. I didn't want to recreate the wheel if I didn't have to. But then there's other specific stuff to Granby on how we do things that are highlighted, but, it's definitely something that we should have, so if someone has a question and they've been trained repeatedly and they still don't get it, you can say, okay, here, this is what's in the manual, you've been trained on it, you still obviously don't understand what is needed, you know, what's the problem, what can I do to help you get it, so.
Some of that stuff is the process is what trips us up with the town sometimes, and Steve Nally, you know, whether it's a principal's gift account or a,
Student activities.
Yep. Account, you know, those, and they're important, but in my world, they're little, but in their world, they're big, you know, because they're in the numbers world. So, the process and the manual will really help define it, and I think open the conversation with the town, Steve Nally in particular, around, is this what we're looking for? You know, is this solving the issue, whether it's a management letter finding or an audit report finding, you know, and then we can just update it like we do the employee manual every year. So.
And in most cases, the process is already there, it's just not on paper, which is obviously the most important thing.
Obviously.
In case someone leaves, you know, we need something that somebody can follow.
And some of the things may seem small, but they may be some legal.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
That's what they are, yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
they-
what it
they
is.
You
Yeah.
can't
absolutely
pay
are.
a bill
Right.
that has an old
2
date.
years, yep,
Right?
yep.
So it would be good for everyone to have that in one place. That's
Yeah.
why I was going to ask if it's a process document for
Yeah.
the most part, but apparently it is.
Yep.
Also, we had some learnings with respect to, say, the RFPs that we're putting out there. If there's no date on it,
Right.
then
Yep.
you do it and redo it. It's waste.
Yep.
You know, how do we prevent those waste? We can document it
Yep.
nicely for
Absolutely.
everyone to know.
Yeah, it's just a central document for everyone to turn to if there's a question that
Cool.
can't be answered right away, so.
So since this is and I don't want to take more time on this, but I'm always interested in process documentation. Is there a way, instead of waiting till next year, since these are a series of processes, it's not just one single process.
Yep.
The way we are doing it with our
Policy.
policies, whatever section is done, can we approve at least we have those in place to be used, and then we can approve those and we can continue to work
Yep.
on the remainder of
Certainly.
the.
That's why I said it's a draft. We can
Okay.
add to it, take away from it
Vote part
whenever,
of it.
yeah, whatever we want to.
Sections of it.
I don't ever want to say it's final, because then that means we can't really add anything or
Yeah.
take away. So I'd rather just keep it in a draft form, but.
Process documents are never final.
Right,
anyway.
exactly. And one last quick note, some of the processes that are in there are ones that you guys had voted on already, and I just brought them in to that document.
Okay.
So,
Alright.
some of that stuff will look the same, but for the most part, it's not all processes, right? It's just kind of more of an overview on how we should be conducting business in the school department.
Great,
So.
thank you. SOAR?
SOAR. Should know this. I should know the answer to this question. Did we sign the contract for SOAR?
I don't think we have a contract yet. There was some discussion, I think, last time when we
Okay.
talked about it.
Right,
Right.
I remember that.
Oy. Okay, I'll get you the contract on the 24th.
Mhm.
Just go back to the minutes. Are they in our folder?
Right. I agree.
Right.
So there was, yeah, I think we tabled most of that conversation last time too, so if there's anything that needs to be discussed urgently, let's just make sure that we have it for next time. When do we start the program?
Yeah, it said more information will be available next
Oh,
meeting.
God. So they're starting. They're ready.
So how will they start without us having discussed and signed? the
Good faith, I guess, maybe. It's the same as Immaculate Marian GAA. So the only change to SOAR was the request for different spaces, because we had to update the contract for West Street School. We had to eliminate that, so it's East Meadow now. Really just the changes for that, the facilities. So there's no change to, I had to ask them to take out that we were gonna collect the fees, because we did not agree to that. They're collecting the fees, so really the facilities is really the only change, and they're requesting some space, some different space than we were originally intending. But that's all been worked out.
Were we able to accommodate some of the concerns that some folks had that kept them from participating in the program in the past?
I think so. Their enrollment right now is just about where it needs to be solvent. And they're hopeful that once they get the flyers into the kids' hands, that they'll have more enrollment and
Okay.
more sustainable enrollment. So
I mean, it's a self-sustaining program, so
Absolutely.
from that
Yep.
perspective, that's fine. But what becomes more important is whether or not it is an attractive program
Exactly.
that
yep, is a benefit.
brings the students.
Right, and they have criteria too for theirs, which is, they're collecting data on MCAS and proficiency and to make sure that the curriculum they're providing, in addition to homework help, is promoting their goals of their grant, which is to improve student outcomes. So,
Questions? Okay, thank you. Budget 18?
Yep, so that's just 18 and 19 budget
19,
stuff.
we're
We'll
gonna talk
we'll
next
talk
time.
the second meeting.
We did not yet close the books.
No,
correct?
so the last warrant was a couple weeks ago. There's some straggling stuff. We gave the town our final number of encumbered purchase orders from 18 that we had to roll over to 19, which was like 51,000 and change. So 18 is really, really close to being closed out. And I reached out to the auditors. There's a few things left on the town side that they need, and then a few things left just for me that I should have already. I got to give to them, and then that'll be settled as well.
Okay.
So,
Are they giving us a time frame here?
so
This audit?
here's some of the problem, right? So we needed to wait till 18 closed out, which was 2 weeks ago on the last warrant. In the meantime, they're out at other sites doing audits, so it's not like they can just jump right back into our audit. So, yes, I guess the time frame is as soon as they get all the information. But some of it I can't provide; it comes from the town. So, but it's getting near.
Alright. Just a quick note on FY19,
Mhm.
the updated budget we're going to present and vote on next week
Mhm.
with the select board.
Mhm.
The timing of that was changed. We received an email today asking us to be there for 5:15. Does it work for everyone for next week, next
What-
Monday?
5:15?
5:15, yeah. I'm just gonna double check my email to make sure that I'm not.
Let's see if I can get it. I have to leave a little early.
I can make it.
I mean, as long as we have quorum and
Okay.
rest of you don't mind, that's
That's good.
that's all good, but I'm just double checking, okay, the Board of Selectmen meeting with the school committee has been changed to 5:15 PM on Monday, the 17th.
which would allow us to have our policy. I'll get dinner.
But that's not what we're gonna have to do, is that meeting, then there's no, not going back here for the school committee meeting, right?
No, next week we don't have a meeting, so.
And this is just a formality, right?
Yeah. So
It is pretty much.
I'm gonna follow up just to see. There should be nothing for us to present. It's really just them approving that number and then allocating it to us. So there's really should be rather quick. They can't. Well, they could say no, but they can't really say no. So yeah, it is a formality, yes. But I'll do research and follow up just to make sure there's nothing that Chris wants from us or select board
Okay,
wants from us.
That would be great.
Mhm.
Yeah, but any earlier than that, even that actually is early for me.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure that I arrange to leave. That's why I'm just trying to make sure that we have quorum. I'll double check with Jen as well.
We have policy subcommittee
Okay,
that Monday.
alright,
Jen's in that, so I don't know if she'll be able to make both. I mean, as long as the three of you are there, you're good, right?
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
you know, I have to check my work calendar and
What time
make
is
sure
your
that,
subcommittee meeting?
What would it be, at 6:30?
6:30.
6:30.
Um,
Yeah.
you're going, right, Mike? And you're definitely gonna be there,
Thanks.
Emery?
Well, that's what I'm trying to determine. I currently, I think I'm gonna be there, but, you know, today the traffic was terrible. I don't know what's gonna happen, so if I'm not there, will we have enough folks for a quorum?
I think I can make it.
Okay.
I need to double check.
And I'll check with Jen as well to make sure that she can make it. I don't suppose this is gonna be a long conversation. So if you guys wanna move your policy meeting to an earlier time, just
Fine.
start early. It's up to you, it's your
Mhm.
meeting, I'm just saying that this will likely not
Right.
take long.
I'm available as early as like 5:30. I get out
Right,
at 5.
and I wanted to send it to you ahead of time,
Yeah,
so you guys could just make comments.
definitely do that.
I have one last question on the budget stuff. So
Yep.
we started receiving the monthly numbers from the town. Kathy's sending
Mhm.
those. So in the past, we asked for that practice, we started receiving it, but turned out we were not really doing much with that. We were receiving it, but you know,
Mhm.
there was no monthly attempt to reconcile
Mhm.
at that point, thinking that, you know, when we get to the end of the year, that's when are we planning on
Yes.
looking at those monthly and
Yes.
showing all the gaps and
Mhm.
keeping communication open? Great.
Mhm.
We actually met with Chris today, that was one of the topics, what was his expectation for how that happens? He was very clear, and we were very clear, so,
Good.
moving forward, we are on the same page with that, so,
Yeah. Because I don't know, 2 years ago when we first started doing that, we made a commitment thinking that it was
Right.
so easy, and then found out that really it wasn't. So
Well, it should be.
it wasn't because
Yes.
right,
you know, if you don't respond to what you're receiving,
Mhm.
that's the difficult part, right?
Mhm.
So
right. No, we seem,
Yep.
we're on the same page.
Yes.
okay, cool, that's good. Any questions on 18 or 19 without details, since we don't have them for today? Okay. I will move the school committee evaluation on top of the other two, school committee goals and superintendent evaluation, if you guys don't mind. And I posted the spreadsheet in our folder. So the idea, and these are based on my assumptions, not necessarily written in stone type of rules. So what I did, I basically averaged what we each decided was the score for all these questions. And if the average was less than 2.5, I marked it with that red frame. And the reason for that, it created a quick visual first of all, but wherever the concentration was, I thought those areas were potentially areas we should have some goals, and this can drive our goals. So immediately what hits the eye is that under community relations, out of the four questions, 3 of them were in red. And the highest one was 3. We did not really have a strong agreement on any one of them. The other area was strategic planning and fiscal management. And finally, we had a few on the conduct of meetings. So there was really nothing dramatic in terms of the budget process, which was interesting. That came out as, you know, potentially needing some help. Probably we have some work to do on that front as well, but not necessarily based on school committee goals. We have a, I think, running goal on that front anyway. So how would you like to do this? There are some questions that seem to be all green. Green being anything more than 3. And then we have some that are yellow, which are 2 or less.
3 or less, it looks like.
No, 3 actually, I just thought 3 is you agree. I did not even put any color around those. 4 was exceptional, strongly agree, so those are green. 2 and under is yellow. Just for everyone to know, a score of 1 was I don't know, 2 was I disagree, 3 was I agree, 4 was I strongly agree. So in some areas we got some disagreement, it seems, which may be an opportunity for us to have a brief conversation and make sure that we understand what the question means to us. And in some areas we all had lower scores. So how would you like me to do that? Are you interested? Let's start with that. Are you interested in looking at those questions where we had discrepancies in the way we answered the question?
I
Okay.
don't wanna take up everybody's night though.
No, that's fine. We can
Yeah.
actually do this fairly quickly, I
Well,
think.
it probably makes sense too to describe the actual evaluation.
Yep. So the evaluation is based
categories
on
at least.
on the guidance. Thank you for that, Dan. These are based on the framework that Massachusetts Association of School Committees developed. There are a total of 37 questions, and the categories under this self-evaluation, which is basically a survey, are governance, operations, member relations, committee and superintendent relations, strategic planning and fiscal management, community relations, and conduct of meetings. So it was good to see that on the member relations side, we did not have any yellows, any reds, in terms of how the members of the committee are treating each other, respecting each other, encouraging to voice opinions and take positions on issues. Let me see. Sharing information that is pertinent so that there are no surprises. Members understanding the role of each of us in this larger group, and doing homework and come prepared to the meetings. I think we were mostly on the same page. There was nothing less than 3, which means everybody either agreed or strongly agreed to all these questions. On the governance side, governance is basically how we are conducting our business, how we are creating policies for the school district, how we are overseeing that, and how we're making changes. The one question where we had, the first question was the one where we had a little bit of discrepancy. There was 1, 2 that was mine, which was a disagree to the question, the committee's policies are clear and up to date. And primarily because we agreed that they were not up to date, but we still did not vote on them and
Right.
bring them up to date. So that was the reason I scored it a 2. The rest of the committee scored it a 3, probably based on the fact that we are working on those
Right.
policies.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly why.
Well, not only that we're working on, but I thought that we were actually almost done with most of the policies.
Yes, we are.
So that's why I put the 3 there. It wasn't that we were, because there's a few down below that I marked lower, because we knew that we were nowhere near where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right, but at least this one here, we knew we weren't there, but we were almost there.
So that's a good point. I primarily looked at the customer's perspective, really. Just if people really
Yes.
go and look at our policies right now, are they seeing our latest and greatest? And they're
Right.
not, because
Right.
they're
Exactly.
not approved and out there. So that was the reason. But I absolutely see it. The second one, maybe a misunderstanding. The committee has adopted a mission statement, and there was one disagreement on that one. Rest of it was either strongly agree and agree. We just, in the context of our strategic plan conversation, adopted a new mission and vision. So maybe we did not do a good job in communicating that one, even to our own committee, to say this is our mission, this is our vision. So we should do that, and I think that's an opportunity.
Also right on your agenda.
So, yes,
Both
it
the
is.
mission
Yep.
and vision are-
Yes. Committee regularly evaluates its progress relative to the goals and objectives that have been adopted. I happen to be the only disagree on that one. And I'm open to hearing everybody else's, because on this one I saw it today and or yesterday, and I don't know that we are regularly looking at our goals and saying this is how we're measuring against our goals.
Well, to be honest with you, if there was a 2.5, I think I would have. I went back and forth on this
Okay.
one because, well, yeah, I went back and forth. I don't necessarily disagree with it, and I'm not in a strong agreement of it either.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
I thought, we've been talking about this pretty regularly. We do workshops. We're talking about scheduling our next. So I felt like this is something that we're very cognizant of, and
Yeah,
I didn't, maybe I just didn't read the question in the same way, but that was my impression of what the question was asking, and I guess the on the grand scheme of things, I don't really know what else we could be doing. So maybe that's the bigger issue, is that I just don't know what question to ask to follow that up with, which is, what are other school committees doing? Are they meeting every year like we are to talk about what our goals are and reassessing? To me, that's an annual thing that made sense, because it kind of follows along with each school year. Each school year kind of represents its own challenges and opportunities and really in big strengths. Like this year we have massive growth, so yes, it makes sense for us to reassess because we finally turned the ship around. But I feel like we've been doing that.
So I felt like we talked about it a lot, but I think to your point, I think the point you're trying to make is we have no way to tell if we're done or if we were successful. Right?
Yeah, that's where I would agree with, that it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like we're doing it in regular
Midterm.
stints, maybe quarterly,
Yeah.
having like a really formal discussion about goals and objectives. It feels like we're keeping them in mind, they're in our framework, but we don't necessarily evaluate on a regular
Mhm.
basis in a formal way.
But what we do, when we talk about it, we do stay as true as we can, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you think about it, the fact that we are looking at one self-evaluation per year, that to me by definition is regressive. So we're looking back. The year is
Yeah.
already over.
Right.
If we had those periodic evaluations, say, these were our goals, how are we doing, is there anything else that we can do before it's too late, that would allow us to correct course as we're doing it, as opposed to looking and saying, oh, did we do well or did we not do well? Well, if you did not do well, there's nothing you can do about it. You already happened. So that was the reason, Jen, that I hear you, and we seem very conscious about the fact that we have goals and we should keep them in mind, and we talked about extensively about our strategic plan, the goals, objectives around it. So I hear your point as well.
But something I've seen recently with some of those new forms, with some new things that you're trying to do on that form, you're pointing it back to the parts of the strategic plan and our
Right.
goals. There's that little section on the bottom of
Right.
what that pertains to.
Right.
Why it's important.
Right.
That's
I think taking a look at, and whether it's a workshop around the goals or changing the agenda, the format of the agenda, so that it aligns every item. It not necessarily is going to align to new business, old business, upcoming business, but maybe each goal, or if each item is, this is strategic plan goal, whatever, this is, this is,
And then we kind
School
of
committee
ensure
goal.
that there's an
Right.
agenda item kind of falling in line for at least one of those goals every
Right.
meeting. And maybe and then when we see we're lacking, that might be the
Right.
opportunity to add in,
Mhm.
let's have a quick conversation about how we're
Right.
doing on this goal or
Right.
whatever.
Because I felt like I had a really good handle on a couple of the school committee goals and being able to sort of, my work with you and gathering information or running a subcommittee or working on a subcommittee with folks. I had a real good idea of a couple of them, but honestly, one or two of them I was like, ooh, did we do that? Did we even keep that on our radar screen? And I think building it into the agenda is probably a way to keep it, in the forefront of the work we're doing.
Yeah, and it's, as I was looking at this, I actually wrote down some thoughts, and one of them was, we have a lot of discussions about a lot of things that don't really necessarily amount to a whole lot, and I think that, we can have a tendency to go off topic, and they're great discussions, but if they don't amount to any decisions or any sort of action items, then that's what turns a 2-hour meeting into a 4-hour meeting.
Right.
And I think we need to do a better job of, again, keeping, the goals and objectives in our framework. And sometimes I think that could also amount to maybe directions to you that aren't necessarily clear enough. And then, we just had a great example of, I know we talked about it, and, it needs to be tightened up and more concise. And I know that we have a lot of dangling items that are still out there that maybe in some indirect way goes to some of the goals, like the soft rate system. 2 years later, we still don't have, the system in place. And yeah, I know we've got great reasons why it's not in place still, but at the end of the day, it's something that the town voted on. We spent $200 and some odd thousand on, and it's, it's on our responsibility list, and it's not done.
Yep. Good point. And I think it's something that we can immediately try to change some things about what you pointed to. I agree with you that sometimes we have great conversations, but they don't necessarily lead to some decision. Not that they're not valuable, at least, from a personal perspective, I find some of these conversations valuable, but they don't really lead to something, and we only have so much time. The constraint that I feel is that we don't really have any other forum where we can have a conversation without calling an open meeting and all that stuff. So when we're here, we're trying to discuss as many topics as we can, but it doesn't change the fact that what you're saying is accurate. We are sometimes dwelling too much on some things that don't require a decision, that don't bring in value. The last question, the committee members take part in educational workshop and conferences to help them make informed decisions. I'm the only disagree on that one as well. This may be a self-reflection because I really think that there are, I don't regularly go to workshops. I go to some, conversation around the budget that the elected officials organize and this and that, but it's not necessarily a workshop that is based on something that will give me additional education. That's why I really enjoyed that book. It's something refreshing, something new. And I remembered what Pam said when she was here last time, that hey, are you guys all going to that conference in November? And I may still not make it because I have a major conflict, and that was at least from my perspective, something that I'm not doing as well as I would like to, and that's why I gave it a disagree. Did everybody go to the joint conference? Okay.
Deanne, have you gone to the joint conference?
Are you going this year?
I am not signed up.
Okay. Well, yeah, it is.
Is anyone going from our?
Yes.
Mike is going.
Yep. Mike is
Oh,
going.
good, okay.
And I actually signed up for it, and if my conflict, I can't do anything about it, then there is that.
When is it?
I can't go this
November
year.
7, 8, 9, 10, you don't have to go every day.
It's
Yeah.
a great conference. I went the last two.
It's in November at Cape Cod. You can't swim, but you can still enjoy Cape Cod.
Yeah, the problem with my job is if I don't show up, I don't get paid. I don't have vacation days, I don't have sick time, so it's a little different in
Yeah.
my world.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay, so that was that. Any questions on any one of these questions related to governance? Is there anything that we should make part of our goals from the governance section, or anything related to governance for that matter?
I think I kinda like, just myself, I kinda like the idea of redoing the agenda and putting it towards our goals, and that may help in some of our side discussions to let us know how much time we should really be spending on some of those topics. That make sense?
Yeah,
It does.
and I also think that maybe
Bring some
quarterly,
examples.
Someone's looking for it, or have some
we
somewhere.
reevaluate the goals and objectives
Redid it, like.
in a more formal setting,
Oh, I don't
in a
know
more
what they're
formal
for.
way, whether we
I have-
tie it into an agenda item at a regular school committee meeting, or we have a separate meeting. We can decide, but I think if we do it at a school committee meeting, we need to make sure that it's a decent amount of time, so that we can have some real discussion around it.
Okay.
So if that were the case, then we'd be looking at, what, I don't know, every 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, I think this agenda is a good example. There is there's time, because a lot of business happened at the first, or the last meeting, which opens up a lot of this meeting for this kind of discussion around, maybe it's the school committee goals, or, tracking where we are with the strategic planner. So if we're smart about the business meeting, then this meeting we have a lot of time if we use it well, I guess is what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, if we can make our time more efficient, then maybe we won't need it in the way that I'm proposing, which would be ideal.
Alright, so you wanna discuss that next time?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Alright, so I'll speed it up a little bit because the conversation will prove too good and we're gonna be here all night. Moving on to operations, there are 3 questions. 2 of them actually, the average got red frame, which means overall we scored ourselves less than 2.5, which I thought was the border between disagree and agree. So in general, we disagreed. In fact, 3 out of 5 scores were disagree. And the question is, new members receive introductory training and orientation when they join the committee. I did not receive any. The only thing that I got was towards the end of the first year, when finally they brought the training to Lee, I went and got the MASC's training. Charting the course.
Yeah, that's what I was using as my guide.
Yeah.
That's why I agreed.
But there's nothing when a new member walks in that we can provide to those individuals, because charting the course is a general training, general class. As we always say, Granby is Granby, right? Just there's history in Granby, the budget process is different, the way we discuss certain things is different. So there's
Yeah.
nothing really that prepares those individuals when they sit down that says, this is how we conduct our business, this is how we do things, these are the timelines. There's no such thing.
And I marked it as.
Well, first we have to create those
That's
timelines and
what it
those
is. Yes,
things,
we have to
and
create
we
don't
can
even have like
actually
this is
Trained.
the secretary of East Meadow School. She's been here forever, and you should probably know who this is.
Yeah.
And this is the union president, and you should
Right.
probably know who that is.
There's not like a
no
departmental chart of
orientation.
the town,
No.
like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I mean, we did
Yeah.
not even do it for Adam, for instance.
Yeah.
Hopefully you were doing all that. In terms of Adam getting acclimated to this committee, to
Mhm.
Yes.
the town structure,
Right.
town government, and all that
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
There is really, there's a lot to be learned.
Mhm.
It's easy to sit here and say it after two terms, but it wasn't really that easy to understand every single thing that people were talking about. They throw chapter numbers and circuit breakers and this and that, and you're thinking of your power structure at home. So
It's true.
Well, that's why I guess I read these questions differently than you did. when I read procedures and protocols for committee operations are published and understood, I thought more of what you're talking about. You know, just the grid of who does what and how timelines are, and they're all published and written down somewhere. That's why I gave it a
Yeah.
2. But as far as new members receiving introductory training, the charting the course really helped me tremendously as just a basic guide, and the rest you have to kind of learn as you're doing this. I don't think there's any real way of teaching somebody how to be a school committee member in Granby without being a school committee member in Granby.
Yeah.
I thought we talked last year when we did our summit of putting together some little packet or.
Yeah, like a welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's
'cause-
why I marked it as a 2, because I know we
Yeah,
didn't get
we
it.
never
We
Right.
should have at least a 1-to-1 with a new member, like a school committee member meeting with a new member.
Yeah.
And just kind of going and having this document and, you
Right.
know, not all school committee members are gonna have children in the system. I mean,
Right.
you know, it happens to work out that way now, but
Right.
if someone's never had kids come through the school system and they're on the committee, they aren't gonna know anybody. And I'm, as an elected person, they should be held accountable to at least the senior leadership team, they should meet with.
And that kind of segued into the next question as far as I was concerned. It's like, so we don't have like a welcome packet, and therefore the new member just walks in like, all right, so what do I do first?
Right.
Yeah.
Sit right
Yeah.
here.
I mean, not only that, even making a motion, voting on things can be
Right.
intimidating
Oh,
when you first
Oh, absolutely.
walk
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
government body. So,
And working with Adam, I mean, that can be
Yeah.
a real challenge.
Yeah, yes, apparently.
I think these are things that we should look into and
Yeah.
Yeah.
create.
We
I
can
almost
find
feel
some
like-
examples. It's, you know, one of the things that we don't have are sort of the school committee big ideas, like school committee mission. We have it sort of in the strategic plan, but there are other districts that have sort of this document.
Yes.
And then behind that document is sort of the welcome information, you know, we're so glad you're a member of the committee, you know, this is who, you know, this is how you contact the superintendent, you know, this is the flow of information, this is what you can expect at a school committee meeting. I mean, very simple things. I mean, I look at some of the, maybe fear is the wrong word, but just unknowing looks in Jen, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I should have told her that before. I could have, you know, so if there was a small welcome packet, I think some of that could be talked about. Robert's Rules of Order, how many people have used that since they were in high school? But we do, and so what does that mean, and what is emotion, and how do you second it, and all of that. So I think
Right.
it would be important.
One of the biggest things, I worked on this a little bit in one of my previous districts because we had a couple new school committee members. It's kind of goes along with this, but it's like open meeting law 101. A lot of people don't know what the open
Right.
meeting laws are and what's a quorum, who can talk, when to motion for something. And it was just a quick, like, and we had it at every meeting. It was just kind of sat there. It was like, review it before the camera goes on and we go into session to make sure you're comfortable and familiar with what can
Right.
take place in an open meeting. And a lot of people don't think of that when they're running for school committee. They don't know anything about open meeting law in Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has some of the most convoluted laws for anything. So that it helped me too as well to say, oh, I never realized you can't do that in a school committee session or an executive session or, you know, what have it. So I think that would be helpful even for this committee, even for us, just to have it along with the agenda, maybe even on the agenda on the back or something. Just there's 5 things that, okay, make sure we don't do this because you'd be violating open meeting law.
Right.
This is
And if anybody really wanted to go back and watch the tape, I'm sure they could say, oh, you guys violated open meeting law, right? And it just opens up a whole other can of worms. So it kind of try to eliminate some of that stuff.
This might be an easy way or an easy solve if we look at what other districts do.
Yep.
Maybe with their manuals, if
Yep.
there must be some school committee meetings out there. This is one thing that I don't think we should be reinventing the wheel on.
Nope, I agree.
And I also, what I don't wanna do is have a new member show up and hand them, you know, some kind of manual that's this thick, 'cause that
With
will
the Mass
overwhelm.
General Law book.
Ugh.
Yeah, that, cause it could be,
Right.
even if it was something that we formulated, it could easily be this thick. So we wanna we don't wanna freak
Do that.
somebody out.
Right. We'll just put a T-shirt on top of it
Yeah,
and a mug. All will
Right.
be well.
Thanks for your service.
that's why I think if we look at maybe what other districts do, and then we
Right.
can just
I
cherry
feel,
pick.
so I feel like that, those two, like finalizing the goals and developing that are like retreat work. Like, that's like, get me 4 hours where we sit and really hammer that stuff out, look at it, say yes to this, no to that, and really, get that product done at that retreat or workshop.
At Tenemus, is that where we're going? Have you ever been there?
Okay, so question 9 through 14, they're related to member relations, and as I mentioned,
You all think you're
they will all agree
amazing.
and strongly agree, which was very important to me. I'm sure it was very important for everybody else as well. But the fact that we are able to, as a committee, and I really respect this committee for that, and I, enjoy our conversations for that reason as well. We don't agree on everything. Even when we agree on some things, we have differences in the way we agree on those things, but it's never disrespectful. It's always with the intent to learn and understand and do things better. So I really appreciate that. The one thing that I a little hesitated on, members do their homework and come prepared to make decisions. So on that one, I think, even though, we're all good and everybody said agree and strongly agree, so this is something that probably collectively we can work on. If we can have the folder populated, say by the previous Wednesday or
Yeah.
Thursday, something like that, it gives us enough time to get into it.
Wednesday or Thursday, he's actually asking earlier than I said.
Oh my God.
I was hoping Friday.
It's a
I mean, that's
perfect
fine, it's just-
Sunday.
I
Yeah.
said weekend, he's
Yeah,
saying
I
Wednesday,
know. It's a
Thursday.
perfect
So here's
Sunday.
why I agree with Emery, because
'Cause
if
then
we
you'll get it in
say
there by the weekend.
Wednesday, right? So what happens is a lot of times we're all busy with the kids and teaching and all of that good stuff, and then all of a sudden it's Thursday, and we look at the agenda and we're like running around trying to get information from people on Friday, and then Friday goes. And
Yeah.
so then it's like, oh, I didn't get to Linda T's to get the enrollment for school choice, and so I think to your point, if we start as an organization looking at it on Monday, getting you the agenda on Monday, then the conversation starts.
You mean the Monday before?
Mm-hmm.
Can we make a motion on that?
We need a motion. But the agenda discussion, waiting until Thursday to finalize the agenda, puts us in a disadvantage to get the correct information in the folder. So if we start that conversation on Monday, so we have school committee, the next Monday we talk and finalize the agenda by Monday or Tuesday, that gives us the work week to get the information in the folder, and then we all get to enjoy our weekend.
So
Yeah.
why shouldn't we
That's
make a
just a-
motion?
Well, I
That's
think we
just a
should start doing that as soon
process.
as
Yeah.
we possibly can.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to your example. So Wednesday, Kathy starts chasing me, right? And she says, "This is the agenda. This is the agenda. Is this what we're going with? And is there anything else that needs to be added or taken out?" Which means by Thursday, right? We have to know what's on the agenda, and hopefully all those things are supported by some documentation that ideally should be in the folder.
Right.
That's why I said Wednesday, Thursday, because, and I said it in a very appreciative way. I really appreciate that you are, always diligently following up on that. So,
And so just to rewind the tape a little bit, the reason we're kind of stuck on Thursday is because that's when it's due to be posted
Right.
publicly. And so if we just, for our own safe space in our minds, did it on Monday, then I think the flow of information to you would be much better. And because if it was final on Monday or Tuesday morning, then, okay, this is all of what I need to get to folks. And then it will be in by the end of the week.
I also think that it makes sense that if a member misses a meeting, that they probably should watch it on, cause now we have YouTube, right?
Yep.
So that way we're
It's
not,
very-
you know, everybody is up to date when we show up at the next meeting, and we don't have to revisit earlier conversations. And that person isn't missing anything.
I think they're also aired the next night on Full Access, right?
Yeah, it's up really fast.
It is up really fast, and you have 2 weeks to
These
watch
meetings are
it
up like
at
Yeah.
your leisure.
We try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're up very quickly.
It usually go up the next night on the channels too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to watch the whole, you can watch it, 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there.
Okay. Great, I took those as notes. Moving on to committee superintendent relations.
I'd just like it known that there are a lot of green blocks. Just
That's actually correct. There are a lot of white boxes, which means
Before we talk about the yellow
it's
one.
agree. There are many green boxes, which means it's strongly agree on
Well, the formula's incorrect, maybe.
on things
The
that are.
formula's
So we had a few disagreements. One of them, the committee regularly evaluates the superintendent using a mutually agreed upon process. Again, this is probably something that we did not do, or I did not do. Honestly, coming from our newest member, who wasn't part of the evaluation,
Right.
we're following the state
Yeah.
state framework basically to do the evaluations, but she hasn't been part of it, so it's normal that she says I don't know.
Right.
And she did not say no, she said I
Right,
don't know.
I don't know.
So
Yep.
the second question, the types and frequency of communications are agreed to in advance. I am the only disagree on that one. I'm not sure that we really agree, we have a common agreement, and when you said are we voting on this one, I don't think we really came to a common agreement that these are the types, this is by when, so that's an opportunity, and I think it relates very closely to our previous conversation.
Mhm.
And one other I don't know was related to committee members contact the superintendent when seeking information. And that is another part of that packet that we were talking about, that we all reach out to you if there's a question, if there is anything that needs to be clarified, and you do the same. I think the wonderful thing about that relationship is that there is really no hesitation. At least I did not have that experience, with you, that there is any hesitation to say maybe I shouldn't call, I shouldn't ask, I shouldn't talk about this subject. So it's very transparent and timely. But if you don't know that it exists, you don't know that it exists.
Right.
So, any questions on committee superintendent relations? Okay. Again, on that second one, which I helped lower below the agree level, we have an
Are you
opportunity.
willing to change your
Yeah,
score?
we have we have an
I'll bring
opportunity.
chocolate.
Seems that yeah, it's gonna need more than that. But
Wow.
so
Man.
Nothing but transparent.
actually, what happened to your chocolate jar that
I
you
know.
used to?
It might
know.
help.
I'm remiss.
I
I am remiss.
Yeah. So I think we should update the way we, the frequency of our communications and what type of communications we are talking about. I think we should agree on that. One thing that we did, I think, once or twice, which I don't want to, again, to dwell too long on this one, but there was 1 or 2 times where we said vote after things that required vote, which your
New form, yeah.
template does. Maybe we can make it a little more apparent on the agenda.
Sure. Yeah. When we were
You know,
yeah,
decision
absolutely.
needed. There's
Yep.
a vote. There, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Cool.
Good idea.
Any questions? Other questions on this section? Committee superintendent relations. Okay, strategic planning and fiscal management. Two questions on average are lower, and they did receive either majority or at least 2 disagreements or I don't knows. One of them is related to the budget process, whether it's documented and published. And the other one is budgets are developed based on needs from the bottom up. So I am actually looking at the first one. Budget process is documented and published. I think we do document and publish. However, at times, between versions, updates, formats that may be easily used by the town residents, I think we have an opportunity to make it, one, a little more comprehensive, because folks are understand the process more than they may be given credit for. So they want a little more. They don't just want a spreadsheet or 2 bullets, 3 bullets. They want to understand, okay, where is the story? And from our earlier conversations, we intend to put a little budget packet that will have a narrative behind it going forward. So hopefully that helps.
So in regards to this, at least my intention is to go to develop our budget document based on the ASBO Meritorious Budget Award, which outlines everything that you need to have in a budget document. And I've always said this: the budget should tell the story of what the numbers are. We shouldn't let the numbers tell that story. So it's good to include some numbers, but we need to have more narrative for the people in the community that don't know by looking at a spreadsheet what $1 million in personnel really means. What does that mean? Why is that number that way? So that's what our budget document will look like. That's not my plan. It's going to look that way once we start the FY20 budget building, and that will be that will help everybody, us, community, really know what's going on and what it takes to build the budget.
So this one is one of the ones I marked as a 2 that I disagreed, and that goes back to that first section where I said, this is something I know we talked about, but we were so far in the beginning stages of it as far as I was concerned, where I couldn't say that we had something lined up.
Right.
Now, I know you have all these intentions, but we weren't really anywhere near those.
Right, and the subcommittee's gonna alleviate a lot of that, a lot of that stuff. The budget subcommittee will really get into detail with that stuff. So
that's why I marked it as I disagree. It's like I
Yeah.
know we talked about it, I don't think we're anywhere near showing anything. That's why I was like,
Are we going to include anywhere in the finance section of even our website? It's just when I think about the budget process, I think about all the language that we use and definitions and how that all goes. That's why I was like, no, we don't do that. Like, we're really good at sharing those spreadsheets, and we do. And Cheryl always, she does a big presentation, and we talk and we do all these great things. But still, those lingering whys and what does that mean? What is Chapter 70? Just a reference point. I think that'd be really
Acronyms
Yeah,
are
so
ridiculous.
when I see budget process, and the website's a good point, right? At least the finance page, which honestly is all I really care about. Not to sound, it needs to be reworked. It needs to be a little more.
I built that.
And it's great, by the way. Great.
That was a great
Yep, it's
introduction.
great.
You rolled that
Yes.
back nicely.
It just needs to be a little more user friendly. But process for me would be like, what's our budget calendar that we're gonna develop with subcommittee? What are we doing on what dates? What does Chapter 70 mean? What does Title 1 mean? What does Title 2A mean? And again, not to sound bad, but you got to dumb it down because people that don't work in spreadsheets all day have no clue what any of that means.
It would be great for our new school committee members too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
really,
Yep.
It'd be,
Yep.
it'd be great.
Yep. And the budget document for FY20 will be so comprehensive because it will include that, and it will be at some point the main document to look at on that finance website. Anything regarding money in the district. And it'll have narrative, it'll have numbers, it'll have budgeting 101, terms 101, whatever we want to call it, but it'll be the document to go to for the budget. Because right now there's spreadsheets on there, and I remember when before I got hired, I was looking at it and I'm like, I don't even know what any of this means, and I do it all day, right? And then so imagine how townspeople or community people feel when they go and look at a spreadsheet and it's got a million different colors on it.
One of the most powerful statement was when we went to the joint committee, and after that meeting, they said, this is the first time I feel like I actually understand more about school budget and so with the addition of Adam and that kind of approach, I think getting that information to people, that we are being transparent, we're not trying to, siphon anything up. These are the expenses, these are why, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do. I think we'll build, really long-term trust.
Yeah, I mean, the same goes for those folks that were meeting as well.
Right.
That's absolutely true that
Yep.
this is not the easiest process, easiest structure to decipher if you don't really get into it and keep on reading. I mean, those books that MASC gives us every year, those are all sections of the law related to schools, one way or another.
Right.
I mean, good luck reading through that. Sometimes the language is not even understandable, so. I don't want to miss anyone. So, Mike, you mentioned yours. Jen, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay. Budgets are developed based on needs from the bottom up. I know we talked about it. I don't know that we ever had a true bottom up budget.
And that'll come out in subcommittee again, our budget
Right,
subcommittee, right?
exactly.
So hopefully this time next year when we're going through this, these numbers would
Yeah.
capture the work that we've done in subcommittee.
So I mean, I'm looking forward to that. It's not that we did not try to do or we're not really
Right.
conscious about it. It's just that the way budgets have been done until very recently, were following a complete different approach. And really breaking it down into smaller pieces and then building it from those smaller pieces wasn't as easy. But we tried to get it into smaller pieces at the very least. But it's not a bottom, at least from my perspective, it's not
Right.
a bottom up.
No, the
budget.
majority is just rollover.
And again, just going to the previous conversation, that will answer some of the questions that we're getting from the finance committee, select board, the town meeting. It makes it easier because we know details of our budget and why they were built in a certain way, what really the need was,
Right.
because it's need based.
And again, that document will kind of educate them on why we made a decision or we budgeted one thing and not another. And then when we go to town floor and ask for money for something, the town will be educated on to, this is why they're doing it. That makes sense. We don't have a problem with that. Or no, we disagree with what you're doing. We're not going to transfer money. Whatever it is, it's educating them as to what we're doing. And I just, from what I've seen in my short time, they haven't been educated
Well,
on
I
that
guess,
process.
I guess the rest of the committee members are a little confused on the bottoms up versus what we're doing, because the rest of us said a 3.
Yes.
And the reason why I said a 3 was because I thought the budget was based on needs, right? I mean, even though it's a roller,
Right.
you obviously have
Yeah.
to start from somewhere the previous year, right? You're taking where you started and then you discuss what you need for the following budget. So I guess I'm confused about what that difference is between that and what
So-
this bottoms up is.
So bottoms up to me, I don't use bottom up. I use zero base. That's that lingo for us. Bottom up, zero base, meaning you don't even have a number. We just sit down and say, this is everything I need. 20 items for the year. What does that equate to? $1 million. We do it for everybody. We comes back. I can't give you $1 million. I can only give you $800,000, right? So cross out some needs. Are some of those needs a want? Or are they a need, right? So bottoms up is you to start from the bottom, from level 1 with no money, no value, and just give me exactly what you need to educate the students in your classroom or in your department, however we do it.
That sounds like a pie in the sky kind of budget. That doesn't even sound
Well, actually,
realistic
we
in
do it,
any
we do it at
sense
the
of the
building
word.
level, first of all.
Yep.
So the building principals know, at least start that exercise
Right.
early on and start building a picture of what they will need. The challenge is that, again, and correct me, it's not that I know every single detail, I just base it on our conversations and what I've been hearing. So the challenge that we have is that we have not followed that approach, so there is really no breakdown that anybody can follow. So each time somebody new comes in, like Stephen came in last year, and then hey, from scratch, you can't say start with nothing on the table and just build everything. So typically, how budgets are sometimes put together is based on precedent. What really constitutes that roughly, and then you just translate it into the future based on the factors that are changing. You may need less, you may need more, but you try to break it into smallest pieces you can, as opposed to this huge thing. Otherwise, you can't take this year's budget, multiply it by a factor, and say that's my budget too. I mean, that's a possibility. What we do, we break it into small pieces within each building, and then we determine whether or not some of those things are needed. Some, whether they need to be larger or they can be eliminated altogether. But it's still not zero-based because we're not really going to that very low level to say, at least for once, we're going to just put things on top of each other based on our needs. And needs are not necessarily, we're not going to address the educational needs of the school district, but needs of any type, you put them on top of each other and you create a budget based on that. In future years, it makes it easy because not every single one of those things will change, but at least you create that structure that will help you build the budget. Is that
Yeah, and and not to get obviously too far into it, and the subcommittee again will weed a lot of this stuff out, but there's 3 real main methods to budgeting. It's zero-based or bottoms-up. It's level service, which means no matter the dollar amount, you continue as you were doing the previous year. It could be less, it could be more, but it's status quo. Or there's level funded, which means no, you're getting exactly what you got last year, and we're going to have to make it fit into that. That's a decision for us and the subcommittee to make. How do we want to approach it? Right, there's never a true zero-based budgeting because there's always needs that you have to have that you start out with. But all that does is get everyone thinking, is it a need or is it a want? Do I want this or do I need this? And again, that's what that subcommittee will weed out, and we can kind of make a decision. It's going to be it's going to be a little bit of each of those categories on how we build the budget. So it's never a true one way, but the subcommittee can talk and make a decision on what we feel is the best approach to building the budget.
I think one example, Deanne, that I can think of is in previous budgets, when we asked exactly how much it would cost to do certain things, it wasn't really that easy to pull it out of a line item, because that line item sometimes included this or that, something that was pulled from here, lump summed, because that was the way it's been budgeted for many years.
Right.
What we're talking about, really breaking it into smaller enough pieces, and you're absolutely right that it's really difficult to go to that absolute zero level, because that's putting every single piece of stone on top of each other. But at least go to that lowest level possible. That allows us to tell everyone when the finance committee asks, or the town meeting asks, or we ask, what is in there that that is costing, or what's causing it to go up, or what's causing it to go down. That allows us to determine those factors immediately. That's where we need to get.
And I thought that's what we have been working towards since Judy came in and spent that whole year changing the way that we budgeted, and then continued since you came. So again, I guess I'm just confused by.
So I think from a building perspective, absolutely, since Judy came in especially, at the building level, again, stop me if I'm just speaking out of turn. Principals worked on building that budget based on what was needed in their buildings. But when, we brought it all together, some of the line items included multiples of those. I mean, when you go to our spreadsheet, for instance, when you look at the line items, there are multiple things at times potentially squeezed in those line items.
I think what happened is
And it wasn't clear
we
what
became
was always
over-reliant
squeezing.
on the spreadsheet to drive the budget instead of the discussions and the narrative driving the creation of how we're presenting the budget numbers. So yes, they did zero-based budgeting the year before, or the year, very first year.
Mhm.
They had
Yeah.
gone through that process. And the result was the spreadsheet. But then over time, over the last 2 years, that spreadsheet's really been sort of the Bible. And there are errors, there are just inconsistencies, there are things that are pulling from multiple sources that really shouldn't be anymore. So it's time to go back and really design that so that it more accurately reflects.
And part of it, again, correct me, part of it seems to be driven by those codes.
Yes,
So,
right.
you drop certain things, certain items in the same line, and if you don't keep track of it, then you don't know which one changed, which one went in which direction, and we wanna be able to do that.
So it seems like, again, because 3 of us answered a 3 and you answered a 2.
Yep.
There's been something that's been missing in translation to the rest of us, is all I'm really pointing out. I understand how bottom-up budgeting works and needs-based and all that. It just seems as though I was more under the impression that we were operating closer to the bottom-up than we actually are. And I think the rest of us, that's all I'm pointing out.
Right.
Something that the rest of us answered a 3 on, that we would agree, and one didn't. That's really what I was pointing out.
I would say that I thought we were doing that bottom-up budget with the assumption that not everything fits into those line item accounts that we used to work with. But below that, everything was needs-based, and then it just kind of got put into those accounts or those line items on the spreadsheet. And yes, there was some mismatching, but the numbers that were there were driven off of what was needed.
Right.
That's what I was assuming.
So to be honest, and this is the last thing from me on this one, when we receive a question, if the answer is not very clear and we say, what we mean by that line is really, these items will either exist or not exist based on the fund's availability, that means we don't really understand what is on that line item. And I, to the extent possible, would like to have that clarity, and that's why I did not call it bottom-up. Because in a bottom-up or zero-based, we should at least know the building stones of each one of those lines. Generally, we do. I mean, when you look at it, our budget, we can speak to each line, whether it's transportation or salaries, different school buildings. We did know each one of those with some certainty and with some detail, but it wasn't necessarily allowing us to be able to answer every question. Is that fair to say? And it's going to be important for us.
So it's really just an exercise in cleaning up that spreadsheet and
Yeah.
making it more, I guess, more detailed where it needs to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I lied. I'll just say one more thing. That exercise that we went through to understand where we were at the end of the year, because funds were not expended out of circuit breaker, instead they were expended out of local, and how they had to be reconciled, and how some money was left over from last year that was added to the whole thing to cause some of the confusion as well, and all that stuff, right? Well, until we sat down and we asked 2 hours worth of questions, and me just creating a spreadsheet on my own, I had the understanding that, this line item means that line item means this, and it wasn't the case. So I got so frustrated, but in that frustration, I also understood that bottom up means potential different things to different people.
Yep. Yep.
And that is not how I would like to have our budget, because questions should be easily answered, especially for that type of funds moving or expended from different buckets. And it's not clear. It wasn't, at least. So hopefully we're going to get there. Is there anything we can do to? Are you saying that there is a workshop that is needed potentially to go over these different types of budgeting? Because I think I heard you say that you do understand what bottom-up means.
Yeah,
but
I don't think I need a workshop on how the budget works. To me, it felt more like it was a communication.
An interpretation of
No,
what
it
they
felt,
meant?
to me, it felt more like it was, something that was not translated to the rest of us, that maybe Emery being the chair and more intimately involved in the budget process with you and with you, that somehow the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, I'm not actually anymore.
Yeah, there's
Maybe tangentially on some conversations on few line items, but I'm not any more involved in the creation of the budget than the rest of the school committee is.
No, I don't mean the creation of the budget. I mean just maybe more detail than what we were. Just in basic conversations, phone calls, whatever it
Right.
might be,
Yeah.
that somehow
Right.
we didn't have the same level of detail or interpretation of how the budget worked.
So that probably Cheryl can admit to painfully that sometimes I do call and ask what this means, why is it that way, where did it come from, how come we didn't see it, or you know, what does it include? So I do ask those questions, yes. But that's, I mean, that conversation is available to every single one of us.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So are we good with this, or any other questions? Okay. Question 28 out of 37, we're right there. So in this section related to community relations, as I mentioned earlier, 3 out of 4 received, on average, even less than disagree. So, so one thing that I did not do well here, which I should have, I did not remove the I don't know, because that doesn't necessarily. But even when I look at it quickly, it was going to be less than 2 or at 2, which is disagree, very close to it. So the first one, the committee has a public relations plan for the school system. That's currently less than 2, less than disagree. There's 1 I don't know, and 4 twos, which is we disagree. So we don't have a plan. Is it fair to say that that would immediately become our goal, to create a plan,
And
communication plan?
If I
Isn't that
may
on
add-
isn't that the subcommittee?
Yeah.
we have a subcommittee, and if I may ask, to have at some time in October, one of our 2 meetings in October, to present our community relations plan. Be great.
Okay. And it is absolutely with the Community Relations Committee, but we basically ask them and they go and look into, you know, what they can do, and they bring it to us. So it's quick. The committee works cooperatively with other branches of municipal government. Interestingly, I happen to be the only person who said agree on this one.
That is interesting.
Who said agree, and everybody else said disagree. So I'm open to suggestions, to your thoughts.
So I thought we made a lot of good strides in the last year,
Yeah.
especially in the last few months, but
I agree.
we don't have any results to that yet, so I can't say I agree yet.
Okay,
I
that's
say
fair.
we're talking more, but I don't know what that's gonna pan out to be, and that's why I answered the way I answered.
Yeah, okay.
And I would say we have made strides. I don't think I would go so far as to say we've made very good strides. I would say that we've made strides in the right direction, but it hasn't amounted to rebuilding any sort of trustful relationship yet.
And that's kind of where I was feeding it, cause I still sit in some of these joint meetings, and I still feel a slight level of distrust, kind of going in both directions.
Yeah.
That doesn't change very easily, so that's
Yeah.
I kinda knew that this was gonna
It's
be
a
a
generational change at this point.
But also, you know, just for all of us, trust is earned, right? So there has to be a little more example on every side, so that everybody, you know, starts building that trust. But in terms of cooperative nature of our conversations, the fact that we had more meetings this year than we had before, that, you know, the select board looked into possibility of finding additional funds, and they came and suggested that, and, you know, we started with that. Finance committee, when we were speaking with them, we collectively agreed that there was a short term and then a long term, and that long term led to some additional conversations, additional collaboration. I was happy about that. I can see the point that you guys are making, but I think that cooperative nature is slowly coming together. So
I just wasn't ready to put a check mark for it.
Yeah.
This would have been a 2.5
Yeah.
word
All right.
option.
okay,
And I would have said a year ago a 2. So there's my, and I'm looking forward to having Adam here this year. I think it's really going to make a huge, like just a world of difference.
And the last thing I wanna say is, when I
yeah.
say that, I fully appreciate it's a two-way street, like some of it comes from us too, it's
Yeah.
not, it's not just
Oh,
the
yeah.
so-
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agree.
Cheryl and I had a great talk with
Yep.
Chris today. I mean,
Yep.
to keep that short and simple, it was forget about the phone, the email conversations. Let's sit just face to face for an hour, and it was
Yeah.
great. It was
Awesome.
there was
Yep.
progress. So
What I would
Yeah.
like to see more of is consistency.
Right.
Sustainability
I
and
think,
consistent.
yeah,
What I would like to see
Yeah.
is the way it looks on the top for
yeah.
for us.
And I think the communication piece, which is we're notifying, but then we're getting notified. So, we're getting
Reciprocity.
notified of timelines, we're getting notified of expectation with the positive presupposition, which is that we wanna work together.
Yeah.
Because when we work together, we do that for the benefit of every single person in Granby, not just the students, but the residents, whether they have children in the schools or not. And I felt like today was a really good first step in that. And we did our apologies where necessary and set some expectations for each other, and it was,
Yeah.
I think, really productive in terms of setting that expectation. We're really, truly, truly are here to work together. And we're not gonna agree on everything. We all know that. But, together, at least we can trust that we're informing each other, we're keeping each other up to date on things, and, that there isn't something coming out of left field.
and email in general is a bad thing for this type of communication
Yep.
anyway. Not only very easily misunderstood, but also it takes many emails to make a point sometimes. Yeah, when it's possible
Right.
to speak face to face, I personally prefer that. It's always, especially in terms of relation building. That's
Well,
always
yeah, I
critical.
mean, ideally, it's a conversation followed up with an email on what you agreed upon.
Right.
Yeah.
That way,
Yep.
you're on the same page.
Yep.
But a phone conversation can be, a 5-minute phone conversation would take an email 30 minutes.
Right.
But I do agree, I mean, I do think that having, important points that you've agreed upon in writing makes sense for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, at
Line
the
of
end, we
business.
have to document things,
Right.
but
Yes,
as you're getting to
absolutely.
that final,
Right.
agreement, interaction,
Well, and you forget what you said in a
Right.
did I say this, did I mean that,
Yeah.
let
Yep.
me refer back to the email.
Right, right.
the school system regularly reports its own progress and accomplishments. So I will open it to you guys since,
I just don't think we do it loud and often enough. Sorry, through enough avenues and venues. I think there's a lot of great things that are happening here that just don't get spoken about outside of sometimes this little room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, we keep it into the, we're really good at reporting our progress and accomplishments to each other and within the school system, but it's just kind of breaking that barrier. But, like if your updates, principal updates, the RAM report, like those things are great, but, those are hitting home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
within the school
It's
committee.
just breaking
Yeah.
that.
I mean, within the school community
Yeah,
and
I'm really
not,
looking forward to moving along with this.
And I do think that one kind of goes back to the first one, it's all about the public relations committee
Yeah.
and what they can do,
Yeah.
how to get that out
Yeah.
there.
I agree.
In a previous district at school committee meetings, we used to make it a point to invite either a student or a representative from the school and kind of report out on some of the things that are happening in that school, or they went on a field trip, what happened on that field trip, and how are you, translating that into everyday education in the classroom. It just, we don't know everything that's going on. As much as we'd like to know, we don't know everything that's going on, right? It kind of just gives not only us, but the public, a kind of a glimpse into what these kids are doing every day, and
Yeah.
is what they're doing in the classroom really paying off. But it's also gives them a chance to get their name and their face out there and highlight what goes on in the schools. I get it. In that district there was many locations, so here there's only 2, but it's still something that get them on the camera or something and let them present to us and say, hey, this is what we're doing. It's great.
Yeah.
Or
One of the things that we are doing here in the library is Chris Brownell has a course now where students will be creating digital media, and it is designed to get out the message of the things that are happening instructionally, but also culturally. So that's the workspace that's over there in the corner. So she had sent out to the entire district, if you have good things, we have students, they have cameras, we want to come document it. And then last year, what we started was GCAM being on site and doing community service with students, training students on, thank you GCAM, training students on taking the camera and creating, again, more digital media so that everyone can see the good work that's happening. Like Mike, I think it's a 2, but certainly maybe a 2.5. It's more about the consistency that we're doing it and the expectation for generating that kind of content.
I will agree with that. Again, just for the record, I had a 3 there because we tried different things, and sometimes I didn't want to lose perspective that some of those things happened in a very short period of time. For instance, I no longer receive it, but Stephen's RAM report, a lot of good stuff in there. We have a lot of Twitter, whatever we call them, feeds for different things, whether it's sports or from schools and all that. We can do better, yes.
Can we still receive those? The RAM reports?
I don't know if there was one.
They're on
I
the
assume that there
website.
was going to be one.
Yeah,
so
they get posted on the website.
Oh, they
but
do.
you're
Okay,
not
so
on
good. I don't
the-
have to miss out on that one,
Probably
I
because
enjoy
you don't
it.
have a student, you're not in the.
Yeah.
Can we have a Twitter feed on the website?
Yes.
Because some folks don't have Twitter accounts, but they can still see what's going on. And if we can pull all the different feeds into one, so there's sports related, there's academic related, other stuff.
That was one of the reasons, and I'm still talking with them, but the app that they had come and presented, and then we worked through CES, and it's sort of just hanging out there right now, but the app for the phone, which would actually bring all of that information together,
that'd
so
be
you
so
make
amazing.
you make one entry and it gets sent.
Yeah.
Facebook, website, Twitter,
Yeah.
not that I would Snapchat, but
Yeah.
anything we decided to send it to, it would go.
Yeah.
And so maybe through the communications, it might be something to consider, because there is, there's some cost to it up front, but the flip side is it can be our emergency all-call as well. So we could, potentially, pay for it through reducing some expense. But that might suffice to do exactly what you're thinking.
What about the Sentinel?
What about it, Robin?
I'd like to see some of the school activities that happen, photos of that posted. I mean, the Sentinel is loaded with things from Belchertown. It's a Granby paper too.
So my experience on the other committee for the parade, the Sentinel was always very, very open to getting information and putting it in there. They just needed us to supply it to them.
And that's it exactly.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's what I'm saying is, if there could be someone in the school system.
I think that's spot on. We're not using.
You're not taking advantage of the Sentinel, and because think about how many people, I mean, it's at Cumberland Farms, it's at Dunkin' Donuts, my husband brings them home, I cut the things out and put them in the teacher's room.
No,
Let's
that's
post 'em.
absolutely.
I was gonna wait to mention this, but an idea that I had for the community relations was a Granby app, a joint app between the school and the town government. That could include, a massive events calendar, all of our town meeting information, our warrants, our elections, parking bans, and then all of the school events.
Right.
It could be every organization in town could have its own calendar. It would be pretty awesome.
Problem
Is
that
paying
arises,
for it
no.
and maintaining
Yeah,
it.
who's gonna maintain it?
Yeah, so maintaining it, right? So how many
Yeah.
hands do you have into that, or is it one person that someone's, everyone's sending information to?
You could
That
see
would-
it being really clunky and,
Yep.
you know, if it's not maintained.
Well, I mean, if it's
correctly.
anyway, I'll tell you what.
Mhm.
I was thinking more on that.
More on that later.
That's good.
I'll put a pin in it.
Good ideas.
Yep.
Anything else on community relations? Okay. Final,
Bless you.
final,
Bless you.
bless you.
Thank you.
Final section, conduct of meetings. So we had a couple here that had the red frame and also received a disagree score from the majority of the committee members. The first one is, committee members receive sufficient information far enough in advance to prepare for meetings. That's,
Think we
I think,
solved
the
it.
conversation that we had. Yep. So the second one, the physical, this one was a little confusing to me. The physical setting is conducive to productive discussion and decision making.
The chair I'm sitting right
Is
now
the
is
worst.
not conducive to productive discussion and decision making, because all I wanna do is stand up and walk around.
All right,
So,
That's what that means.
okay.
so I have to agree, but I had a couple more things I wanted to add to that.
Yes?
If I could just swing around to this side of the table, I don't get that blast of sunshine at that
yeah.
point in time,
Yeah.
and then I don't have to keep leaning over past you, and you don't have to keep
I
swinging
know, I
around
have to
me.
do it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I have
I'm
to
sorry
do
that
it
you
too.
felt like you were, kind of condemned to that seat, but you can move anywhere you want. It's just
That's
We did
why
so much work last year, moving us all over
I know.
here.
It is
and-
better. It
Yeah.
is better.
But the alternative also is to consider the new media center.
Why not?
At the elementary school. So
Why not?
that may be a
Please.
better setting for us. It may also more conducive to the public. So at some point maybe we want to
How
take
about
a
next
walk
meeting? Let's do
over
it.
there and see. Wow.
No,
can we do it
I'm right
soon
with
enough,
you.
or
Would you like to try one over there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And see
Yeah,
how
let's
it
try
is?
one.
Okay.
let's see
We're
how
gonna
it works.
try.
Wanna start
the
this one
next
over again?
Meeting at East Meadow Media Center. Yes.
My fob doesn't work past 5 o'clock, so.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Done.
let's try it.
Done
Because
and
I did
done.
not
See
know
how
whether
easy that was?
custodians were there or not, so I
Yes.
didn't even
Yep.
propose it.
It's
Okay,
same as here.
that's good.
Mhm.
Fours all the way across.
Yeah.
Solved.
Okay. So that's it. So based on that, in my notes I have things related to governance, from updating the agenda, making it more actionable, or put items in that are actionable and require decision, creating a packet for new members and finding out what the other districts do as part of that, but creating that packet. Post-meeting information in advance, which came up in a couple of sections. Members who miss a meeting will be asked to watch. This is not even a goal, but one of the things that popped up. Strategic planning and fiscal management, better narrative for everyone to understand and explain the numbers. We're going to start with the FY 2020.
Yeah.
We are discussing, we said, but we seem to be in early stages of more robust dialogue around our budget. Need for references to the law, acronyms, grants, what have you, all those things that are obscure, and better understanding and better documentation around need-based budget going forward. Better communication with the town, create a public relations plan, which is the goal, basically. Better communication with the town, use the area newspapers, especially Sentinel, better, promote school events and successes better, improve the website, and make use of technology to reach out to folks. So what goals, if any, we can decide on? We don't need more than maybe 3 goals, and maybe we have some in place still that are not complete.
So my only question is, were we going, I had in my notes, I thought that we were gonna invite the public to the
Yeah.
24th to give feedback as well.
Yeah, this is not final, cause we're gonna
Okay.
have to, yeah.
All right, I just wanted to make sure
No,
before I
that's
left that I
absolutely. The next
so
meeting,
I-
right?
Right,
Yeah.
so we will put out a Connect Ed probably next Monday, and then a reminder,
So do we
Friday.
wanna do the goals at that
And that it's
time?
gonna be next door?
right? We're so small.
So you guys wanna do the goals at that time?
Yes.
Okay, so no need to create draft goals now.
Well, I
Okay.
think it would be,
No,
I
that's
think it
fine.
makes sense to
That's good.
just see what comes out of that.
Yep. So thank you all very much, first of all, for taking the time to enter your scores in this. This was very helpful, and it's in our records. If you know, we need
Can
to.
you send me your notes? These were very
I was gonna
clear.
ask, is there any way you can just put them in that folder? Or do they not have access? They do have access to that folder, right?
Just upload them to
On that Google
tonight's
Drive.
shared
Which
folder.
Tonight's
folder is
shared.
that?
The folder that we
September
put all the
10th.
Oh,
stuff
yeah, I
in?
have access to that.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Yeah. So I have to.
Sometimes it's just good for me to refresh my memory before you go into the next meeting on.
Okay, I'll do it right after this meeting.
So putting it into the 24th folder?
No, put it into
the 10th.
the 10th
10th.
folder, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, for the record. All right, I'll get to it. I'll have to copy paste and then do it. Okay, superintendent evaluation. In terms of our timeline, I will, and I don't know how everybody feels about that. I will propose that we don't do it before the end of the year. We build towards it, start working on it, but bring it back after the first of the year. So it would at least address some things that we have seen for this year and whatever else we need to capture. The other thing that can be done very easily, we can push it all the way to towards the end of the school year. That will give us almost a full school year to build our evaluation on. Because my understanding is that there is really no right or wrong rule. There is really no established timeline. So, but I did not really want to do it immediately. That was the
I
intent
think part
at
of the
all.
process really is to establish the goals and, so getting the school committee goals, the strategic improvement plan goals, getting all of that, and then those set the district goals and the superintendent goals, then the principal goals, and then the teacher goals, so all of them come together. That takes a little bit of time.
I don't think we could do it by the end of this year. It wouldn't be fair to you. You get your goals and then say next
Right.
month you're gonna be judged on.
Right.
Yep.
End of, do you mean the school year or the calendar year?
Well, I think the first one was, do we wanna do it by the end of the calendar year, which I don't think is possible if we haven't even given her goals yet.
No, I don't think that gives us enough time to evaluate.
Right.
On the other hand, I really don't wanna be doing a superintendent evaluation at the same time as the budget. Crunch time.
Yes. So let me be very transparent and say this. I would like you to be part of that evaluation as well. So, the timing, and you're not gonna be with us after May. So, to the extent that we can involve this school committee in that evaluation, whatever the timing is for that, I'm good.
It has to be April.
Yeah, we can do it in April. It still falls into our budget season.
And it can be its own meeting, so we just,
Right. Yeah, I'm just thinking around budget season, you know how that goes.
it's gonna go
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to have it wrapped up by March, at least the heavy lifting of it by March. So, yeah, you're still in budget season, but I don't see it really interfering into, the core work of building the budget. By that point, I would hope, should be all set.
So then what if we did it, we have two meetings on the April 8th or April 22nd? Would that be, how would you feel about that?
That's fine.
It would probably make sense to do it on the 8th.
Yeah, because I would say I would want to shoot for that second meeting, us present presenting the budget to
Yeah.
the full committee. That'd be the latest. That'd be the latest, so yeah, that might be.
Yeah, because whatever budget issues are on the second meeting,
Mhm.
well, who knows, it could be you just
That's
don't
tentative.
know.
I would just say if
yeah.
the 1st of April would probably be better, so I can shoot for the 2nd meeting of April to present to the school committee.
How does that sound? Maybe
Sounds
the
good.
first meeting in April?
Yep, April 8th. Sounds good.
But it requires a lot of pre-work,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
so we have to get
Evidence,
into
give
that.
you the
Alright,
evidence.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that can start in January, even December and January.
And we probably need to have a discussion around the expectations as far as the evidence, right?
Yeah.
'Cause, you know,
And I think the goals will drive that, so,
Right.
you know, that's probably an agenda item, so what evidence would the committee see as, be looking for?
Yeah.
And then we can just wrap that in.
The notes don't copy and paste, so it may take a little while, but I'll post it there. Okay, so anything else related to our old business? You do have a superintendent's
I
report,
do.
right? Yes.
So congratulations to Grace Sinclair, whose artwork was part of Amherst's Arts Night celebration at Emily Dickinson Museum. I was actually able to go and attend, and I was there early, and they were, funny story. So the art person told me that they had gone to dinner, and so I bumped into them on the way. I was leaving, they were coming. I said, "Oh, where'd you go to dinner?" They said, "We went to CVS and had nachos."
Oh.
And I was like, "You're in Amherst."
Jeez.
But they didn't want to miss any of the art show, so they were both, Mom and Grace were very enthusiastic about the night, and it truly was beautiful artwork. And the woman who I spoke to in the show, or at the show, she was just amazed at the quality of work that Grace was producing. So kudos to Grace.
So that should be one of those things, right? We should have her
Right.
here in school committee and.
Right.
With some of her art.
Yeah,
Some
right.
of her
Yeah.
art, yes, yes. And to the Sentinel, I heard that.
Congratulations to her, and I'm happy that at least a tradition is continuing, because we were lucky to have many students who in the past who had great sense of taste of art and who shared their art with us. So I'm very happy that it's
Yes.
continuing, and I can't imagine that this is really a small deal. I mean, being at the
No.
Emily Dickinson Museum and
No.
Not at
being
all.
so visible, that's awesome.
And her work that she presented amongst all of her other work that she does, her explanation was this artwork of hers was chosen as a representative of the femaleness. And so for the Emily Dickinson Museum, it was very thoughtful, extremely thoughtful. Grace was also the winner of the top prize of the art show last year at HCC. And so kudos to her for that, and then this as well.
One last note, with some assumption behind it. I know that all these students have great talent, and I love the fact that they are sharing that talent. But I also will make the assumption that the great teachers that they have in our schools are, really nurturing their love of art. And we see that exhibited whenever we have arts night and everything else. So kudos to our teachers as well, really
Yes.
bringing that out of our students. So.
And I think one of the things that Granby offers is this sense of flexibility, and students just soak that up. So if, art students are getting, really enthralled in a project, it literally is the teacher picks up the phone and says, "I'm going to keep Grace for a little bit, is that okay?" And sure, it is okay, because that's the expectation, is that we circle around the kids and give them what they need. So
Cool.
that's part of our expectation of each other. So it's really cool stuff. We had a combination of district-based instructional leadership team and teacher-led professional development to kick off the year, so I wanted to say thank you to all of the staff who created and presented such outstanding professional development. For your colleagues, you are amazing. We welcomed 734 students with our preschool and kindergarten students joining us this week, and it certainly is an exciting time to be part of the Granby Public Schools. And there's lots of pictures of our opening day, and both at the high school, our teachers welcoming students. I was actually there taking this picture at the high school. And as much as those high school students and middle school students wanted to be mortified and embarrassed and give us sort of the cold shoulder, they couldn't help but smile and laugh as we cheered them into the school. So it really was a wonderful welcoming for them.
The best part is it looks like Steve Sullivan is looking into the library in that one high school picture.
Yes.
I like double took for a second there. I was like, what?
Yes, yeah, because I didn't put any boundaries. And if you notice the second one down, that tree, I actually took the picture here and here, and when I put it together, it's like almost perfect. But they're not the same picture. So, yeah, I noticed that, so I did it. It was pretty funny. So anyway, again, we can't thank the school committee or the community enough for the commitment of the new building. The opening has been very smooth. Parents have really, I think, adopted to the dual drop-offs and the bus loop and all of that, adjusting well to the safety procedures that we have in place, which are different. So thank you to everyone for that opening of the new school. It went very well.
So for that West Street Building Committee, I will add to that the school building committee for all the work that they've
Yes.
done. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into it. So well done, and thank you to them as well.
And I'm not trying to grease anybody's feathers, but Chris Martin has been fabulous in terms of all of the purchasing and staying on top of every single change order and email. I mean, him and also Bill Latoy in the building really have worked to make sure that every single thing that we've asked for is completed, and on Chris's end, making sure that all of the contracts and the payments and all of that has gone as smoothly as possible. So it is at least another full-time job that both of those folks are doing. So kudos to both of them.
Yeah, and thank you to both of them.
Yeah.
I think I asked one of the questions about being concerned that it was gonna happen on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You never know what was gonna happen when they started
Yep.
doing construction.
Yep.
Collaborative? Are you done? Okay, sorry, I just
Yes.
jumped. Okay.
Are you done?
Wow. Guess so.
I asked it.
I'm gonna change
with a
my
different
answer on
intent,
that
but-
committee superintendent relationship.
Too late.
Too late. Yes, I am complete.
Okay, thank you. Always good to see this. Collaborative.
Well, we have not met since June.
Okay.
But I do wanna bring up, something that I will be meeting, the end of this month. They've got a somewhat new, part of the meeting that they penciled in. If there's any concerns from the districts, we can bring them up for a discussion, and see how other districts are doing. So keep that in mind, if you want me to bring something up, I can bring it up.
Alrighty. West Street Building Committee, well, the school building committee did not meet. One quick note is that we officially released the West Street Building August 10th, was it?
I think that's
Something to
correct,
the
yes.
effect,
A long
yes.
time ago.
So that was done. Policy Subcommittee.
We are meeting next week. We met a couple weeks ago. We had reviewed, what section were we on?
We started at the beginning, actually.
Yeah.
So we either
Yeah.
reviewed or edited A I think 4.
Yeah, and so we're meeting again next week. Cheryl's gonna be uploading, we're gonna try something a little different. Cheryl's gonna upload the comparisons, and Jen and I are gonna review them before we meet, and basically when we get together, it'll just be, okay, this is ready, this is ready. So
Okay.
we hope to be
Good.
cranking through the rest of these over the next maybe 2 meetings.
Cool, thank you guys for that. Did we have anything else? I don't think so. Alright, so for our next meeting, we said let's discuss the updates to the agenda and how we're gonna present it at our next meeting,
Give
so
some
if we can,
examples.
with some examples. Cool, I think that's all we have for our next meeting from this one.
No,
The class size.
right,
with the
draft or
input from
something,
the
yeah.
leadership team.
Right.
So what do we expect for class size?
I think just a general overview and timeline,
Timeline.
maybe for when certain things might happen, like surveys or general overview and timeline.
Overview of best way to
Measure.
benchmark.
Okay, our measurements and all
Right.
this, okay. Cool. And if some of those things are not in the notes, what are we talked about? Oh, well, we have the video, don't we? Cool, alright, so that is our open session. We're gonna vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Part A3, to discuss strategy with regard to collective bargaining, as doing so in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Can we have a roll call, please?
Deanne Payne-Murkowski, aye.
Jennifer Karen, aye?
Emery Ervin, aye.
Simpson, aye.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And can I suggest